The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferens.
How about a $25 per hour minimum wage? Well, Democrats in the House have introduced such legislation. Meanwhile, flight attendants at Horizon Air vote 99.8% to go on strike. And today on the show, the Center for American Progress and the United Labor Agency. Welcome to the Wednesday, July 1st edition of America's Workforce, where we are available on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. We have 2 guests on the show today. They're both named David. All right. David Madlin, he'll be our first guest. He is a senior fellow and senior advisor to the American Worker Project at American Progress, the Center for American Progress. AmericanProgress.org is the website. He is the author of a number of books, one of them, Reunion, How Bold Labor Reforms Can Repair, Revitalize, and Reunite the United States. He's been featured on TV and radio programs, including PBS, CNN, Fox News, even NPR, and he's also been on America's Workforce. He's going to talk about a new study on unions. Despite challenges and gaps, we know what's going on with unions in America. Unions continue to offer a reliable avenue for building wealth and reducing wealth disparities across race and education. The analysis finds households with a union member have roughly 2 times the wealth of households without a union member, which is equivalent to an additional $241,100 in median household wealth. That's the union difference. We're also going to talk about a new rule from the Labor Department that's going to recalibrate the disclosure reports that unions are required to file. Now, the conservatives love this, that unions, especially the big unions, they have more work to do. So David is going to talk about that. Later in the show, we're going to check in with Dave Megenhardt for decades now, over 3 decades. David has held the office of Executive Director of the United Labor Agency, and they, for years, have been one of the great sponsors of America's Workforce. He's going to talk about how successful they have been in the past year. Over 1,000 placements. And we're going to talk about the trends, the industries, and the wage rates. Decent wage rates, actually, over $23 an hour. I know for some, that's still not enough, especially with the high prices of just about everything. We're also going to talk about the ULA also hiring for several positions. So ulagency.org is a website to go to for more information. And now a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. How about this? Democrats in the Senate have introduced a bill that would raise the federal minimum wage to $25 per hour in 5 years. The legislation is identical to a bill that House Democrats put forward earlier this year and shows a growing faction of a party coalescing around $25 as their goal for a wage floor. The federal minimum wage, sadly, is currently $7.25 per hour and has not moved in 17 years. Senator Chris Murphy, one of the bill's sponsors, said there is no reason that somebody should go to work full-time in this country and not be able to pay their bills. It's time that everybody that works makes a dignified wage. Now, that 25, mind you, would be spread, wouldn't happen immediately. It would take 5 years to get there. By the way, Associated Press is reporting the bill has no chance of becoming a law while Republicans control either chamber of Congress and President Trump resides in the White House. The American Association of Flight Attendants, which is affiliated with the Communication Workers of America, their flight attendants at Horizon Air have voted, how about this one, 99.8% to authorize a strike at the wholly owned Alaska Air Group regional airline. The vote is the result of delayed bargaining and months of outrageously low economic proposals from management. The CWA's president of Horizon at the AFA, Lisa Davis Warren, said, "We have dedicated our lives to the company and the communities that we serve. We are simply asking for the pay, benefits, and improvements we have earned." But Horizon management, well, they seem uninterested in resolving this dispute or showing the slightest concern for frontline workers who cannot afford rent or other basic life necessities. The demands include living wage pay increases, increased pay for time at work, including while boarding the plane, better benefits, and work rule improvements. Now, the right to strike is triggered when the National Mediation Board declares that negotiations are deadlocked and releases both parties into a 30-day cooling-off period leading to a strike deadline. A little bit different in that sector. Just another hoop that they have to jump over. But the vote, it's pretty significant, 99.8%. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the union difference with David Madland of the Center for American Progress. Back in a few minutes, you're listening to America's Workforce.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
Rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
we are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, where you can find more at teamster.org. Are you an experienced mechanical insulator looking to take your career to the next level? Insulators Local 50 in Central Ohio has steady work for a number of years. Insulators Local 50 offers a total wage and benefits package that can't be beat. It's not just the competitive wages. Local 50 also provides medical, vision, and dental insurance with no paycheck deductions for you and your family. Don't miss out on the chance to secure your future. Join us at Insulators Local 50. Earn great pay and the best benefits. Visit insulatorsfifty.com/AWF50 to fill out the online form, and a Local 50 representative will call to begin the process.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Once again, thank you for keeping us, that's right, keeping us the number one union podcast in America for not one, not two, but 3 years in a row. AWFpodcast.com. Everything is archived there. We've got a lot of good shows, and we continue to have good shows, and that's because we have good guests. And one of them is our featured guest today, David Madland, Senior Fellow, Senior Advisor to the American Worker Project at American Progress. Great website. You got to check them out. AmericanProgress.org. is the author of several books. The most recent one came out about 5 years ago. Reunion, How Bold Labor Reforms Can Repair, Revitalize, and Reunite the United States. Also, a book came out over 10 years ago, Hollowed Out: Why the Economy Doesn't Work Without a Strong Middle Class. Boy, I'll tell you, that one hit home there, David. Thanks for joining us once again. David has been featured on a number of TV and radio programs. He's also been on America's Workforce, and he is out with a new report, and he had some other authors work on this one. It's about building wealth. And, in today's economy, that's not an easy task. It's really difficult because things are not affordable. They need to be more affordable. But here's the good news. If you're in a union, you can build wealth, a lot of wealth. David, talk to me about this new research report on behalf of the Center for American Progress. It's all yours, brother.
Well, thanks. First, thanks very much for having me. It's always a pleasure. So yes, we did this new report where we looked at the wealth effect of unions. And wealth is sort of the value of all the savings you have, your assets, your retirement, if you have a house, minus any debts you have. And we found that the sort of wealth of union members compared to typical non-union member, the typical union member had more than twice the wealth, about 460,000 compared to 220,000. And so this is a really big deal to me in lots of ways that I'm sure we'll get into. But the gist is that wealth is sort of the sum total of your income over years. Do you have any sort of cushion if things go wrong? Can you handle a health emergency or a little bit of a layoff? Are you prepared for retirement, or can you fund your kids' education? It's kind of the real best measure, I think, of how people are doing. And unions make people do a lot better.
David, let's stop right there. I have heard many times, I'm sure you as well have heard the line, and I don't even know if it's true. I would assume some of it might be true, but a good chunk of America is maybe 1, 2, 3 paychecks away from being in financial trouble. Are you hearing that? What's the status of that?
It's true. Yeah, it's absolutely true. There's lots of surveys that will show that. And in fact, our research also shows that. One of the most quoted stats are sort of, could you pull together $400 for an emergency? And there, upwards of a third or more of the public couldn't do that with ease. They would have to go to friends or go into debt or the like. This, we also find that in our research, union members are a lot less likely to have no net wealth. They're a lot more likely to have actually some emergency savings, so they could afford that. Not every union member is doing great, but on average, they're doing much better. And we find that that's because of what unions do. And you can most people know this intuitively, but I think it's sort of worth spelling out. We know that unions help negotiate for higher wages. So that helps you have a little bit more money to save and spend, et cetera. But they also provide better benefits, health benefits, so you're less likely to go into debt, retirement benefits, so you can save for the future, and they help you have a more stable career. You're less likely to be fired arbitrarily, so you can keep earning money throughout your career. Combine all of those things, and you have this really positive wealth effect, much better outcomes that we show here.
David, talk to me about how you conducted this research. Is it like in the past year? Is it over several years? Maybe you can give me some of the details on that.
Well, this is new research that we did based on the Survey of Income and Program Participation, the census survey, that we look at the past kind of 5 years. We've also done previous research from the Federal Reserve, where they come out with a survey every 3 years. So this sort of updates our research and gives us more samples, larger sample size, so we can do more fine-grained analysis. And I think that's also important because we can show, for example, that the people who need unions the most benefit the most. For example, those without a college degree have the greatest wealth effect. They have about 2.5 times more wealth, while as those who have a college degree get some benefit from joining a union, but less than those without a college degree. Similarly, for Black workers, Hispanic workers, whites benefit as well, but the biggest benefit are those kind of who are typically do the worst.
Well, let's get into that a little deeper. And I noticed that what you just said is in the survey and the report that you came out with the Center for American Progress. Families of color experience the largest proportional gains in wealth when a union member is present, even though overall wealth remains lower than for white households. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. So, um, white households have much more wealth on average, and that's for a lot of reasons. Much of it is sort of historic that they were able to get passed down some wealth,
Sure.
for example. But Black and Hispanic households get about 3 or 4 times the boost from being in a union. Um, so the union household, Black union household, gets about 3 times the wealth compared to a non-union Black household. A Hispanic union household gets about 4 times, whereas the white, it's going to be 1.5 times. You're going to every racial group, every gender, everyone gains from being in a union. Just the biggest gains we see go to as I said, the Black and Hispanic workers. My sense is that this is because those workers are less likely to have a retirement account in their jobs if they are not in a union. They're less likely to have health benefits if they're not in a union. They, all of these things, they're less likely to have job stability. So the union kind of is able to, by equalizing and making sure that everyone's treated fairly, they bring up those who are most likely to be taken advantage of in the labor market.
David, traditionally, union households have, because they collectively bargain, have better health insurance. And I don't know if the Center for American Progress has taken a deep dive in that. Are they more healthy as a result of better health insurance?
I did a study about 10 years ago where we looked a little bit into that. And in fact, we not only showed that they're more health, but their kids have better health outcomes. Union members' kids have, and that's likely because of the better health insurance. I haven't done a recent follow-up, so I can't, don't make sure, I assume it's still true. And to me, this is likely because of the health insurance, but also the stress you have when you can't pay the bills and you're worried about affording things is just less when you're in a union. You still have worries, still have, struggle with to make the ends meet. But when you know you're less likely to get fired, when you have sort of everyone bargaining there together to get better wages, benefits, et cetera, you have a little bit less stress. So my sense is that it's the actual benefits and then the mental stability that likely leads to these kinds of results.
And we have to point out it varies by occupation too. I mean, if you're a coal miner or if you're, in the trades, I mean, that's dangerous work at times. So it's understandable.
Yeah. That's why the best studies, try to do the comparison between the most comparable workers. And so that makes the research definitely pretty difficult to tease out. But as I said, generally, that's what we find, that the union members do a lot better.
We're speaking with David Madlin, who is a senior fellow and senior advisor to the American Worker Project at American Progress. We're talking about a new report that came out from the Center for American Progress about building wealth. Building wealth is essential to improving economic security for working Americans. And it turns out those in union households are building more wealth than those in non-union households. Okay, I'm going to throw this at you now. I think all elected leaders would like to see us building wealth. I mean, you talk about good jobs. They talk about good jobs. They don't necessarily create good jobs. A lot of good jobs have disappeared over the years. They've gone to China. They've gone to Vietnam. They've gone to Mexico. They're trying to bring some of those jobs back, but it's not happening fast enough. So my point is this. They want to build wealth. They want us to be richer, but then they attack unions. And unions are helping build wealth. Can you explain that part for me?
No, not really. Politicians are a big problem. That's among the reasons we have the lowest union density in basically American history, where private sector union membership is 6%, less than 6% of the economy. That is lower than it's been in 100 years. At the same time, we have half of all workers saying they want to join a union, but they can't, or they struggle because the law makes it so hard to form a union and successfully bargain an agreement. So the politicians need to actually support unions instead of going after them. Unfortunately, they almost never do that. My mind, they have favored corporations for far too long. They have let them write the rules of our policy. And so, the most likely explanation for why politicians don't do what they need to do to support workers and support unions is that the financial incentives encourage them to support corporations who have lots of power and influence and money, and unions have less. They have some power, some influence, but not the same scale. And so politicians have for far too long supported the interests of corporations at the expense of workers.
David, I could say this is a very common sense discussion on what needs to be done in America. And here's a crazy part of this. If people made more money, you know what that means. It means more tax revenue. And they love that tax revenue part. But, well, I don't know. We'll see what happens here. In the meantime, a lot of politicians and the current Labor Department has come down on unions when it comes to transparency. So hold that thought. I want to talk about that because things are changing. Things are changing for a number of unions, especially those larger unions. We'll talk about that next with David Madlin, our featured guest on the show today. He's senior advisor to the American Worker Project at American Progress. Do check out this website, americanprogress.org. A lot of good information posted there. Back in a few minutes. You're listening to America's Workforce.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
It takes LIUNA to build North America's infrastructure. From roads and bridges to schools and skyscrapers, the men and women of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, build the projects we depend on. From constructing the Freedom Tower on the site of the former World Trade Center to untangling Washington, D.C.'s congested interstate, LIUNA members do the work that matters. Find out what it takes to be built by LIUNA at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Iron Workers. You can find more at ironworkers.org.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferens with America's Workforce.
And remember, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, here's what you do. Just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and give us a rating. Always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. David Madlin of the Center for American Progress is our featured guest today. AmericanProgress.org is a website you want to go to. David, I want to talk to you about what happened here in the Department of Labor. They recently announced a final rule designed to increase financial transparency for unions regulated by the Labor Management Reporting and Disclosure Act. Now, this rule creates new requirements for financial disclosures, especially for the big unions. Labor unions with more than $40 million in annual receipts will need to file a new report with the Department of Labor. They have time to do this. From what I understand, it's probably going to go into effect in July of next year. So this goes to the attack on unions that's been going on for decades now. And boy, I just wonder if they could do the same kind of thing for corporations because they could be pretty sneaky at times. We all know that. But what do you make of this whole thing here? Is this just to make, especially the larger unions, more, obviously more work for them, right?
That's part of what's going on, I think, is, there's a long history of using the reporting requirements to just create burdens for some unions. That said, there is a need for transparency. There is a need for members and the public to know how unions are spending their money to make sure that it's all on the up and up. Because as you know, unfortunately, there have been historical examples where unions haven't always spent the money as they should. But what I think is going on here mostly about targeting unions instead of corporations. So while this rule might be fine on its own, you would sort of say, just as you alluded to, what's good for the goose is what's good for the gander. We should also do at least the same for corporations. And unfortunately, we are not. And the Trump administration is just imposing rules on the union, additional rules on unions, and weaker rules on corporations, which we can really get into. And one last thing. This is not the only thing the Trump administration has done to make it harder for unions. And that's where I think you put this in the pattern. So the biggest example, for example, is the National Labor Relations Board, which is supposed to enforce the rules to make sure that corporations don't do things like illegal union busting. That was basically non-functional for about a year because they had not a quorum. So I put this as, a part of a pattern of favoring corporations at the expense of labor.
It's interesting you bring up union busting. We did a recent podcast on that alone, and it was a different organization, the Economic Policy Institute. You're probably familiar with them, along with Labor Lab out of Montana. They found that U.S. employers roughly spend $1.7 billion a year on union avoidance. And they ran down the law firms, and Amazon leads the pack, no surprise there. Are you at all surprised by that, or do you think that number is probably higher?
It certainly could be higher because, and as I'm sure you discussed, the reporting of the union busting that corporations do is really bad. Legally, they are supposed to report when they are hiring an anti-union consultant, and actually supposed to be doing that during the actual campaign. Unfortunately, far too often, these are delayed for years, so you don't know what the corporations are doing. There's minimal enforcement of when companies don't even file these forms. So this is what I meant sort of by the good for the goose, good for the gander. The corporations should be actually held accountable just as unions should be. And when you're only trying to go after one side, in this case, the Trump administration is only going after the unions, I certainly have to question their motives.
And they're only making it more difficult for the larger unions, those with more than $40 million in annual receipts. Don't you think that's kind of strange? Or should they, if they want to be fully transparent, shouldn't they do all of them?
Yeah, to me, this is a sort of pretty standard regulatory kind of thing. You have a question of where you draw the line. Sort of the small businesses maybe have small businesses in other cases. In this case, smaller unions have a lower need and ability to actually sort of comply with the regulations. The question is always where you put it. And it probably is actually they're going to capture the vast majority of unions with where they put this line. So only the very, very smallest unions are actually going to have to not report as much. Again, this isn't the worst part about it. To me, it's the hypocrisy and the double standard. And just to get further into the double standard, not only, this is the Trump administration, not just when it's dealing with labor and corporations, and we can go into more detail on that, but much more broadly, the Trump administration has really stopped enforcing a number of things that are designed to prevent corruption. So the Trump administration claims they are going after labor unions to prevent labor union corruption, but they have stopped enforcing the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which means corporations can bribe at will, basically. At the same time, they have just about dismantled the Public Integrity Division of the Department of Justice, which is supposed to enforce corruption amongst public officials. So there's really, to me, that's what's most egregious about this, is you go after labor unions, which are a democratically elected organization that generally pushes for the will of its members. Yes, there are flaws. Yes, they may be held accountable. At the same time, you are taking away all accountability from lots of corporations and elected officials for their corruption. And that's a big problem to me.
So the laws are on the books, which you just mentioned, to stop corruption, especially by corporate leaders, but they're looking the other way on that one.
And publicly saying that's exactly what they are doing. That's even worse. Not only have they just disbanded these, they've said, we're just not going to enforce this stuff anymore.
Certainly a different world we live in today. Well, David, I thank you so much for joining us here on America's Workforce. David Madlin, Senior Fellow, Senior Advisor to the American Worker Project at American Progress. It's the Center for American Progress. Here's the national website. Lots of good information posted there. American Progress, that's all one word, .org, AmericanProgress.org. David, thank you so much. I enjoyed the conversation, and I'm sure we'll have many more in years to come. Okay, brother?
I hope so. Always a pleasure. Thanks.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Dave Megenhardt on behalf of the United Labor Agency. Once again, you're listening to America's Workforce.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org. Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies formed out of a need to provide affordable health care to teachers, to loggers, and miners. Back in 1965, the Blues developed the National Labor Office to strengthen its commitment to organized labor. Blue Cross Blue Shield's National Labor Office remains focused on America's workers, advocating for affordable and equitable health care, partnering with strategic alliances to provide industry-leading products and services, and proudly serving more than 18 million unionized workers, retirees, and their families. All working hard for America's working families, for the health of America. You can learn more by following them at Blue Labor on LinkedIn and X, formerly known as Twitter.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferentz with America's Workforce.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Let's check in with Dave Megenhardt. Dave's been a longtime sponsor of America's Workforce on behalf of a great agency in Northeastern Ohio. It's called the United Labor Agency. They started back in 1971 when I was still in high school. Wow, that was a long time ago. And Dave's been there for well over 3 decades. And this is an organization that places people in jobs, good jobs, hopefully union jobs. Many union jobs. Dave, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us. I think this is a good way to start talking about the placements of those good jobs. You always, take a look at what you've accomplished here. And from what I'm reading, 1,000 placements sounds pretty darn good. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, it's always great to be back, Flash. Hope you're enjoying the weather. Our program year goes from July 1 to June 30th every year. And so at the end of, the program year, we want to look at like how we did and how are we responding to the economy? What are the trends that are happening in the labor market? And happy to report that we are going to end the year with 1,002 placements. So, and with that, so you say, okay, so 1,000 people got jobs. What kind of jobs are they? Our average wage is over $23 an hour. It's $23.58 for those, and that's just everybody that comes in. Some people come in, they want training. We send them to training, then they get a job. Some people just come in looking for a job, and so that's everybody. That's the entire universe. When somebody goes into training, however, and so that means they're upgrading their skills. They're going to a vocational institution. They're going to Tri-C, Cleveland State sometimes, other proprietary vocational schools in town. That wage jumps up to $28.78. So very happy about that. The wages are much higher than they have been in the past. And that's obviously incredibly important with the cost of living and prices going up and having impact on families. So that's something that we really look for because, we don't want to place somebody in a $14 an hour job, right? Because, it's going to be, you never get ahead and you'll never be able to sustain that. So a lot of those jobs are coming in the healthcare sector, which not surprising in Northeast Ohio. We see a lot of people that are coming in with backgrounds with healthcare. They want to upgrade their skills in healthcare, or they want to try to break into the healthcare field because it's growing and it will be growing for many, many years in Northeast Ohio. With having the drivers up, UH and the clinic and Metro, having these 3 great hospital systems in the area. And, that's good, kind of really interesting. We also want to look at, the warts of the economy. And so when you're trying to break into healthcare, and if you're looking in on the, sort of the least skilled level, you can see workers really struggling, right, to try to get hours. So, so we try to work with companies that, provide full-time employment with benefits, but, that we can't place everybody in those. And so what will happen is people have like a series of jobs or multiple jobs, and they're going from job to job. It's almost like gig work, from going place to place. And that's something that's very hard. And that we want to, kind of try to work with over time to, we know when it happens, we try to work with over time for people to get into even the better jobs. Beyond that, a lot of people going still into manufacturing. Surprisingly, even there's been downturn in manufacturing, but there's a lot of churn. There's a lot of retirements. There's still quite a bit of opportunity for people to go into manufacturing. And yeah, so I think that's what we do. We try to work with employers and unions very closely every day to try to figure out what the conditions are, what the openings are, what the skills needed are, and then try to match people. And or if you can't match them, of course, skill them up, right, and give them skills that they can actually use into those opportunities. So yeah, we're very pleased with it, and it's the economy has been odd, as everybody can imagine. While the labor market seems healthy, but with prices going up, wages going up, but a lot of uncertainty.
That was my next question here, especially in the wake of artificial intelligence. You've been monitoring all the stories about jobs being lost, especially like data processors, people that are working in the computer field. It seems, though, that healthcare and in the skilled trades, there's a lot of demand. I'm just wondering what you see. I'm sure you want to make sure that you're following the trends and trying to make sure you connect the people with the jobs that are going to stay jobs for them. Well, what do you see ahead?
Right. I mean, you're right. I think healthcare and there's some instances, AI has been introduced as an assistant that you can't necessarily replace the job. It is really what everybody is talking about. Every employer wants to talk about it. They're all trying to figure out what it means to them and how they implemented it, if they implement it. So while there's a lot of discussion and there's a lot of anticipation, I think we're like sort of on the cusp of some really giant change, right? But I don't know if people at this point, at companies at this point, have made the decision, right? So they're still trying to figure out what it means and what the cost is if there's a benefit. So, I think the national AFL-CIO's position of you have to include workers in these decisions is essential, right? You don't want this to be a job killer, right? You don't want to just leave it to the market to say, oh, well, it'll all figure it out, later. We've been through that in deindustrialization, and that was a terrible experience. We can learn from that you don't have, mass levels of unemployment can lead to, people being desperate and, areas, going down and dropping into poverty. So yeah, I think that everybody is a lot more clear-eyed about it. And they know the impact that it could have, and they're asking hard questions, which I think is really a key thing. I think there's some pushback, right? I mean, I think there's some reticence about this because, people have to have jobs. So, they have to do things. I don't know if AI is going to take care of it all.
Well, speaking of jobs, I understand the ULA is hiring. What kind of positions are we looking at right now?
We're kind of across the board right now. We're good news is we're expanding. So we have some new opportunities, and, we are looking for people who want to help counsel people in transition, right? So if you're a people person, if you want to dig into the economy and how, all the things we just talked about and how the economy is changing and the dynamism of it and how you help people navigate that, right? And how do you counsel them into what positions to take, what, training to go into, what skills to learn, ultimately, though, to be able to relate to people, right? And relate when I say people in transition, they could be people that have been laid off, right? So they have a good job, they get laid off, those jobs are no longer in demand to what they did, and so now they have to change careers. Or it could be somebody who's marginally attached to the workforce, right? So they want to make a change, and they're trying to get their foothold in, and their work record, might not be as good as like somebody who had just gotten laid off. But so how do you navigate that, and how do you work with them to be able to try to find the best fit for their personality and their interests and their likes and their aptitudes, right? So it really comes down to, for the people that work for ULA, for me, you have to treat people with respect and dignity and kindness, right? We'll start there, and then we can build the skills from it, right? You have to be able to connect with people. And the great news is that ULA is a good place to work. We have benefits that are second to none. Our wages are right in industry, at the top of our industry. We have, we're very flexible. We're unionized, of course, by OPIU. And so workers have a voice in our company. And, we consider them as partners and as collaborators, and, to try to create the best service that we can, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a really good place to work.
One word comes to mind: compassion, because you're dealing with someone who lost their job, who's probably angry about what happened or what is currently happening in the economy. So you have to relate to that person. You have to comfort them and say, hey, you know what? We're going to do the best we can for you, considering the skills that you have. And if you don't have those skills, we'll help you get them. That's what it's all about. It's really important. It's a tough time in people's lives. I totally get it. And I understand what the office is moving here.
Yeah. So the big office, our biggest office that we help operate is the Ohio Means Job Center in Cleveland. And currently it's on Carnegie Avenue. But unfortunately, ODOT is coming roaring through with the expansion of the Interbelt, and it's going to take all the parking lot away. So that's not a viable spot anymore. So on today, as a matter of fact, July 1st, the new center opens, and it's at 1975 East 61st Street, and it's that area where it's right by where the Cleveland Foundation built their headquarters. It's right next door to that new Dave's supermarket. So it's, I told the staff too, I said, you're going to have to sign up for our wellness program, because it's very close to Gallucci's. So you really can't eat at Gallucci's every day. I love Gallucci's, but you start eating at Gallucci's every day, we're going to start adding some pounds on our waistline. So, but it's right there. It's great. It's a beautiful building. It's taking over from a corporation that was their headquarters that never came back after the pandemic. And so it's all very newly renovated, light-filled, and absolutely beautiful. So it's really a really shining example of the space and experience that somebody deserves when they're going through transition. It's really a great, sweet place, and really looking forward to seeing how people react to it. And I think it's going to be a new chapter in the services. So it's really good. Very proud of it. Yeah.
You got me going on Gallucci's, and I promise you this: when I go there, and I love that place, if I see any of your employers there, I'll text you and I'll say, hey, you better talk to Joe here.
Yeah.
I saw him here too many times.
It's right. You see that ULA jacket, see the ULA on their jacket, or whatever. We go, hey man, you gotta maybe do a couple of walks around the block or something. I don't know. Help me out.
Oh, they got great pizza. They got great sausage. They got a great wine selection. Oh my God.
I know, right? It's making me hungry already.
Well, we're going to leave it on that note. Dave Megenhardt, Executive Director of the United Labor Agency. ulagency.org is the website you want to go to. ulagency.org, one of the many proud sponsors here on America's Workforce, and for many years, I might add. You take care. Have a safe summer, okay?
I will. Thanks.
And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce. Tomorrow, Dorsey Hager of the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council. Until then, all of you have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's